On my 30th birthday, my guardians gave me a plaque, estate's most expensive burden. I smiled, paid the property taxes, then walked out. 3 months later, my cousin called. Lady Henrietta and SIR Reginald are about to lose the manor. Please help. My name is Julian. I'm 30 years old. I live in Cornwall, in a coastal manor that's older than some American cities. The place belongs to my aunt and uncle, Lady Henrietta and Sir Reginald, though I'm the one who's been keeping it from crumbling into the sea. That evening, I was arranging a garden feast for my 30th birthday. Tablecloths pressed, fairy lights strung, wine glasses lined up like obedient little soldiers. The garden looked beautiful. It should have. I designed it myself. Every stone, every hedge, every bench had been carefully restored with my own hands. But no one ever really noticed that part. Oliver would arrive soon, of course. My younger cousin, heir to the estate, apple of the family's eye. Even now, I could hear Lady Henrietta's voice in my head. Oliver has such presence, don't you think? Such confidence. He had presence, all right. Presence enough to stumble his way through 3 failed business ventures and still get invited to speak at charity galas like some kind of prodigy. Meanwhile, I was the ghost behind the scenes. The guy who unclogged the manor's ancient plumbing, rewired the kitchen, patched the crumbling roof, and paid for it all without asking for a penny in return. My private commissions, landscape design for wealthy clients, kept the estate afloat. But ask anyone, and they'd say it was Oliver's charm and strategic vision that saved the place. That morning, Lady Henrietta had burst into the drawing room, breathless from her tennis match or maybe just the excitement of being in her own presence. "Julian," she said, "I hope you've ordered enough oysters. Oliver's bringing that actress. What's her name again? Elspeth. She adores oysters." "Elena," I muttered. "And yes, I've ordered plenty." She didn't hear me, or she didn't care. Probably both. Sir Reginald walked in a moment later, already halfway into his first gin and tonic. "You know, Jules, if you just market yourself better, you might be half as successful as Oliver." I didn't say anything. I just adjusted a centerpiece and smiled like I always did. For years, I told myself I didn't need their praise, that it was enough to see the manor looking less like a ruin and more like a home again. But lately, that story was getting harder to sell to myself, especially now on my birthday. 30, a whole round number. I'd thought, maybe, just maybe, this dinner would be different. Maybe they'd notice the work I'd done. Maybe they'd say, "Julian, thank you." Or even just, "Happy birthday. We're proud of you." I didn't need a toast. I didn't need a plaque. I just wanted to be seen. As the sun started to dip, the candles flickered to life on the long oak table. The guests began to arrive in polished shoes and vintage jewelry, cheeks flushed from wine and praise. I stood at the edge of the scene, wiping my hands on a linen napkin, heart stupidly hopeful. Tonight, I told myself, tonight they'll see you. Tonight, maybe, you won't be invisible. I didn't know yet that they'd already planned the joke, the plaque, the punchline. But even if I had, I think I still would have set the table. That's the kind of fool I was. Dinner was in full swing. The garden buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of cutlery. A breeze came off the cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and roses. I stood behind the head table, checking that everyone's glasses were topped off, plates cleared, that no one had to look twice to get something they needed. That was my role. Always had been. Lady Henrietta raised her voice, tapping her fork against a champagne flute. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The chatter died down. "I do hope you're enjoying yourselves," she beamed, rising gracefully. "Tonight, of course, we're not only celebrating this beautiful weather and this stunning dinner. Thank you, Julian, but also someone very special to us." I felt my stomach tighten. This was it. Maybe this was the moment. "Julian," she continued, turning to me. "Our dear Julian turns 30 today. Can you believe it?" Polite laughter echoed around the table. I smiled tightly, waiting. "And to mark this occasion," she said, with a flourish, "we've prepared a small token. A little something to show just how much he means to us here at the manor." She bent down and retrieved a box from beneath the table. I stepped forward slightly, uncertain. She opened the box and held up a small silver plaque. My name was engraved on it. So was something else. "To the estate's most expensive burden," she read aloud, smiling like she'd just unveiled a priceless joke. Laughter erupted. Real laughter, from Oliver, from the other guests, even from Sir Reginald, who chortled and took another sip of his drink. "I mean, really," he added, "if you're going to bleed us dry, Jules, at least let us commemorate it." The blood drained from my face. I tried to smile. I even let out a laugh, dry, forced, mechanical, like my body was following a script my heart had already left behind. "I suppose I should be flattered," I said, voice even. "Not everyone gets a plaque." Henrietta patted my arm. "Oh, come now, don't sulk. It's just a bit of fun." I nodded. Of course. I cleared the final dishes with steady hands, poured one last round of champagne, accepted murmured compliments on the dinner with a polite smile. No one seemed to notice that my voice was quieter than usual, or that I barely touched my plate. No one noticed I didn't stay for cake. Back in my room, I opened my banking app and transferred another installment to the estate's tax fund, just enough to keep the roof over their heads for one more month. Then I packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just a few clothes, my design sketchbook, and my laptop. I left a single note on my desk. Happy birthday to me. Then I walked out, past the glowing garden, past the guests, past the table I'd built, and the lights I'd strung. I didn't look back. The country roads curled through fog like something out of a dream, or a memory. I didn't really know where I was going at first. I just drove, passing hedgerows and sheep-speckled fields until the sun gave up and the sky turned the color of whetstone. Eventually, I stopped near a river I remembered from a childhood picnic. Pulled over, engine humming softly, I stared out across the water. The manor was 100 miles behind me, but the weight of them, still clung to my skin. I sat there a long time, just listening to the sound of water moving over stones. Then I reached for my phone. First, I unsubscribed from the estate's monthly maintenance emails. Then I closed the shared account Lady Henrietta used to track household expenses, the one I paid into every month without question. I blocked Oliver's number, then Reginald's, then hers. My fingers hovered over the message thread one last time. The last thing she had sent me, months ago, need funds for chimney repair. Will credit you at the year's end. She never had. None of them ever had. Delete. When I looked up, it was fully dark. A new kind of dark. Not the kind that crept through cracks in ancient windows or settled in musty corners of a neglected estate. This was clean, fresh, quiet. I slept in the car that night, wrapped in a wool blanket from the boot. Woke stiff and cold, but clear-headed for the first time in, years. Later that day, I found a cottage for rent in a nearby village. It wasn't much, just 3 rooms and a slanted roof, but the floors were bare wood, and sunlight poured in through wide windows. It smelled like dust and time. It felt like possibility. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Days passed, then weeks. I kept my head down, took long walks, bought groceries from the market without bumping into anyone with a title. I didn't answer emails. I didn't explain. I started journaling. Nothing profound, just stray thoughts, sketches of garden layouts I might never build. I began designing community spaces again, not for clients, just for the joy of it. Parks, libraries, public greens, things that grew. One morning, I called a therapist in Truro. Her voice was kind, businesslike. We made an appointment. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. That small act, asking for help, but not from them, felt like a door cracking open. For the first time in decades, my mind was quiet. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. A month into my new life, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. Cream-colored envelope, slanted handwriting, a faint trace of lavender that took me back to rainy holidays and misbuttoned cardigans. Margot, my great-aunt, long estranged from the rest of the family. I hadn't seen her since I was 15. She'd left the manor under circumstances no one ever talked about. Something about inheritance drama. Something about the wrong person being trusted. As a kid, I never understood what that meant. Now, it felt eerily familiar. The letter was brief, direct. Julian, I've heard what they did. You should know that none of this was meant for them. Come for tea. We have much to discuss. She signed it. With affection, always Margot. The return address was in Boscastle, a windswept town on the cliffs. I drove out 2 days later. The tea house she chose was tucked into the rocks above the sea. Wooden tables, chipped mugs, windows fogged from the kettle. She was waiting for me already, wrapped in layers of mismatched wool, a long silver braid down her back. You look like your mother, she said, not unkindly. Same shoulders. We skipped the small talk. She slid a folder across the table, worn, overstuffed, bound with twine. I opened it carefully. Inside, financial records, dozens of them, copies of inheritance documents, estate ledgers, trust fund withdrawals. My name appeared again and again, next to amounts that had vanished, next to clauses that had been ignored. Your parents left instructions, Margot said quietly, that you were to be given stewardship of the estate, not just the house, but the land, the finances, the legacy. My breath caught. I looked up at her. She nodded. Reginald and Henrietta didn't agree, claimed it was impractical to give a child control of an estate, so they shifted things, quietly, over years. She flipped a page. Oliver's name was everywhere, next to development schemes, consultation fees, branding initiatives. Thousands of pounds funneled into nonsense, failed ventures, all under the pretense of modernization. And they used the money meant for you, she added. Every last pound. The last few pages were letters, scanned copies in my father's handwriting. His tone was firm, but loving. He wrote about responsibility, about trusting me to carry the family's name with integrity, not arrogance. He wrote about protecting me, even if it meant giving me power early. I blinked hard. Margot poured more tea. They used you, Julian. Took your work, your money, your name. You kept them afloat, and they called you a burden. My jaw clenched. Not from surprise. Some part of me had always suspected. But to see it in writing, it settled something. She reached into her coat and pulled out a USB stick. Copies of everything. And one more thing. What's that? A solicitor in Truro. And an estate historian. They've been waiting for you to call. I closed the folder slowly. They'd rewritten my story behind my back. But the ink wasn't dry yet. Now, I had the pen. Back at the manor, things were beginning to fall apart. Oliver tried to hold court as usual, pouring wine at garden luncheons, charming local sponsors with grand visions and vague promises. But the cracks were showing, quite literally. The West Wing roof began to leak. The kitchen boiler gave out. The gravel drive was never relayed after the last storm washed half of it down the hill. Repairs halted. Staff hours were cut. The estate that had always worn its decay with pride, historic character, Lady Henrietta used to call it, suddenly just looked neglected. Creditors started calling, not quietly, either. A solicitor from Exeter showed up in person, demanding payment for work done on a failed vineyard project Oliver had launched to put us on the map. That map, as it turned out, cost £30,000 and had produced exactly one harvest of sour, undrinkable wine. Lady Henrietta, ever the performer, took to posting increasingly dramatic updates in the Manor's newsletter and online social pages. "We are restructuring the estate to ensure a more sustainable legacy," she wrote. "We appreciate your loyalty during this exciting transition." In reality, she was hosting tea parties with chipped china and wearing scarves to cover water stains on the drawing room ceiling. But the updates continued, desperate and theatrical. One post blamed unexpected absenteeism for the estate's slow season. She never said my name, but everyone knew who she meant. They called me, of course. It started with guilt. "Julian, dear," Lady Henrietta's voice trembled on my voicemail. "We're simply heartbroken over the misunderstanding at your birthday. It was meant to be playful. You know how your uncle jokes." Then came the anger. "You can't just walk away from your legacy," Reginald growled in a clipped message a few days later. "You owe this family. You owe this house." Then the fear. Oliver called last, his voice a mixture of irritation and panic. "I know things got weird, but you can't just disappear, mate. The taxes are due. You always handled the taxes." I listened to every message once, then blocked their numbers again. Instead, I poured myself into my work. I joined a community restoration initiative in the village, an old railway garden being turned into a public park. I volunteered at a local conservatory, teaching kids how to prune roses and read soil. People there didn't care what title I did or didn't have. They just saw the work. Word started to spread. A retired architect offered me a commission on a heritage garden in Devon. A council member asked if I'd consider consulting on a land grant program. For the first time in my life, I was building something that couldn't be taken or twisted. I didn't mention the manor. I didn't need to. They built their story on borrowed money and borrowed names. Now it was caving in. I had my own name, and I was finally using it. I met with Margot and her solicitor in a quiet office above a bakery in Truro. No wood-paneled walls or hunting portraits here. Just white paint, a pot of wilting orchids, and a woman named Sarah in sensible shoes who listened more than she spoke. We laid everything out: ledgers, letters, scanned documents, the inheritance clause. Margot had been thorough. The solicitor nodded as she reviewed the files. "This isn't just mismanagement," she said after a long pause. "This is deliberate misappropriation, a breach of guardianship duties, and a strong civil case for inheritance fraud." Margot smirked over her teacup. "Told you." Sarah asked what I wanted. I didn't hesitate. "I want the truth out," I said. "Not just in court, but in public. Quietly, professionally, but permanently." So we began the campaign. It started with an anonymous article in a local heritage journal about historic estates and the danger of misused family trusts. No names, but plenty of detail. Case studies of a certain Cornish manor, where restoration funds were funneled into branding projects, while basic maintenance was ignored. The piece caught attention, mostly from retired estate managers, local preservationists, and a few nosy peers of the realm who adored a scandal wrapped in tweed. Next came a series of social posts. Not mine, not directly, just quiet whispers from people in the know. Margot's friends shared quotes about the weight of family legacy. Someone from the Garden Society posted a photo of a dilapidated conservatory with the caption, "Once grand, now neglected. How many caretakers are never credited?" I kept mine subtler. A photo of a blooming wild garden, captioned, "Sometimes the best things grow once you stop trimming them to fit someone else's shape." Another, of my workbench, built from salvage, still stronger than most family heirlooms. People noticed. Old clients reached out. A writer from a regional magazine messaged, asking for an interview. I declined, politely. The story wasn't ready yet, but she would hear it soon. Then the local press caught scent. A reporter emailed me directly. "We've been hearing things about the Trelawney estate. Would you be willing to talk? On or off record?" I didn't respond. Not yet. But the cracks were spreading. I heard through the village that Lady Henrietta had taken to calling everyone darling again, her old trick when things went sideways. Oliver stopped appearing at charity dinners. Sir Reginald, apparently, had a mysterious illness that kept him from public events, though the illness conveniently avoided golf season. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt prepared. They had written a story without me in it. Now, I was rewriting the ending, one whisper at a time. The estate trust office was a neutral space, clean lines, soft carpet, no family crests on the walls. Just a long table, a coffee pot, and the quiet rustle of paper. It was perfect. Margot sat beside me, regal as ever in her cobalt scarf and low boots. Across from us sat Sarah, the solicitor, and a representative from the Historic Estates Council. Press had been invited too, just one local reporter, notebook in hand, promised to keep the story under wraps until we gave the word. Oliver arrived first, strutting in like a man who still believed charm could fix anything. He wore sunglasses indoors and offered the room a grin so wide it hurt to look at. Lady Henrietta swept in next, pearls clinking, smile brittle. "Julian," she said coolly, "what is this farce about? You could have just called." Sir Reginald trailed behind, coughing into his fist, looking less like a knight and more like a man halfway into panic. I stood. "Thank you all for coming," I said. calm and measured. This is a formal review of estate oversight per the Historic Trust Charter. Lady Henrietta blinked. Review? Margot pulled out a folder and slid it to the center of the table. Sarah followed with a thumb drive. This, Sarah said, is documentation of decades-long misappropriation of funds meant for Julian Trelawney. Funds that were redirected under guardianship into unrelated expenses, including personal ventures and public appearances. Oliver scoffed. Oh, come off it. That money was used to keep the estate alive. Incorrect, said Sarah. She tapped the drive. We have records showing payments to your personal brand consultant, a failed vineyard, a motorboat, and a boutique design line that never launched. I pressed play on a voice recording. Oliver's voice filled the room, unmistakable and smug. Honestly, if Jules ever stops sending money, we're screwed. The whole estate runs on his charity. But he's so desperate for approval, we just string him along like a loyal butler. Click. Silence. Lady Henrietta paled. That's out of context. It's crystal clear, I said. Margot laid down another envelope. Letters from Julian's late parents. Their express wish was for him to inherit the estate. The only reason it didn't happen was because she looked straight at Henrietta, used her title to block the process, then rerouted his trust to support your son. Reginald tried to stand. This is absurd. Sit down, Sarah said sharply. He did. The council representative cleared her throat. Based on this evidence, we will be launching a formal investigation. The estate may be transferred to neutral administration until legal matters are settled. The reporter scribbled furiously, lips pressed together to hide a grin. Oliver slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. We're the Trelawneys. No, I said, standing. You're just the ones who stole the name and built a story around it. But the truth is louder now. Henrietta's voice dropped to a hiss. Julian, think carefully. You'll ruin us. I nodded slowly. Yes, and I'll do it without raising my voice. The meeting ended in silence. They didn't storm out, they slunk. The way people do when they've run out of lies to stand on. Outside, the wind blew salt off the sea. I stepped into it like someone being baptized in air. It was done. I hadn't destroyed my family. I'd simply revealed them. The estate didn't survive the fallout. Within a month, the Historic Trust froze all discretionary accounts tied to Trelawney Manor. The groundskeepers were let go. The charity partnerships vanished. Lady Henrietta issued one final newsletter, thinly veiled rage in cursive font, blaming administrative confusion and malicious interference from outside parties. No one believed her. The creditors came next, quiet at first, then loud. Oliver's name was removed from 3 local business registries. Investors stopped returning his calls. I heard he was seen arguing with a banker in the village, sunglasses off, voice cracking. Eventually, the manor was placed under temporary stewardship by the trust. Their assessment cited mismanagement, missing funds, and unsubstantiated familial claims. Repairs halted completely. The West Wing was cordoned off. The future of the estate was now a matter of paperwork and preservation committees. I was asked if I wanted it. I said no. They didn't deserve it, but I didn't need it. Let it become a museum, a historical footnote, a cautionary tale. Lady Henrietta called one last time before I changed my number. Her voice was sharp but tired. We're losing everything, Julian. Everything. Is that what you wanted? I thought for a moment before answering. I wanted honesty. I wanted peace. I wanted to be seen. And now I want boundaries. I offered them something. Even then, a list of resources. Pro bono legal aid for debt restructuring. A therapist in Truro who specialized in legacy trauma. A grant application for historic restoration they might qualify for if they could admit wrongdoing. They declined. Sir Reginald wrote back only one sentence in response. We won't be pitted by the help. Oliver sent a voice message I never opened, so I left them to it. They had always mistaken silence for loyalty, mistaken kindness for weakness. They had built their identity on my back, and when I stepped away, the whole thing crumbled. Good. Let it. I spent my days in gardens now, community spaces, public lands. I was designing things that bloomed where anyone could walk. No gatekeepers, no plaques, no golden boy stealing the sun. People started to know me not as a Trelawney, but as Julian, the guy who fixed the rose beds at the hospital, the one who replanted the school courtyard, the one who answered emails, showed up on time, and kept promises. The boundaries held. They would keep holding. This was my line in the soil, and this time, no one would cross it. I bought the stone cottage at the edge of the bay in late spring. 2 bedrooms, crooked windows, a garden wild with daisies and nettles. The place wasn't grand. It wasn't historic, but it was mine. No family crest over the hearth. No echoes of old arguments in the walls. Just sunlight, salt air, and silence that didn't accuse me of anything. I hung the plaque in the corner of my new studio, estate's most expensive burden, still gleaming, still ridiculous. But now, it made me smile. A reminder of what I'd carried, and what I'd finally put down. Margot visited often. She brought cuttings from her greenhouse and gossip from the coast. We started a small project together, transforming a forgotten patch of trust land into a community garden. Raised beds, compost barrels, benches under apple trees. We made a sign from reclaimed wood. For everyone, volunteers came. Kids, retirees, a quiet man named Ravi who'd been a carpenter before arthritis slowed his hands. He brought birdhouses. A teenager named Lily came every Saturday to water the mint and talk about leaving home someday. I didn't give advice. just passed her the hose and listened. At the local botanical conservatory, I started teaching workshops. Landscape design, low-budget restoration, native species. The first time I stood in front of a dozen people with mud on my boots and plans in my hand, I realized I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I already was. Not as a nephew, not as a burden, but as myself. And slowly, without planning it, I built a new family. Neighbors who dropped off jam jars and cut firewood. Colleagues who became friends. A woman named Kate who ran the coastal archives and always smelled like cedar and lemon tea. We talked about storm-proof greenhouses and Victorian seed catalogs. One night, she asked what it was like to grow up in a place like the Trelawney estate. Lonely, I said. She nodded and said nothing. That meant more than any performance of sympathy. We all brought something to the table. Not lineage, not performance, just presence. I didn't tell anyone about the manor unless they asked. And even then, I kept it brief. That chapter had closed. But I kept the plaque, not for irony, not for bitterness, for truth. Because it was the last thing they gave me, and the only one they didn't mean to. Proof that I had been there, that I had mattered, that even when they laughed, they knew I was the one holding everything up. Now, I didn't have to hold anything. I just planted, watered, built, and taught. Every day, something bloomed that hadn't bloomed before. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need a title to feel valuable. I had peace. I had purpose. I had roots, my own, finally taking hold. And that was enough.